Thank you for staying with us, everyone, on TMI this Thursday. Let's put our first discussion on the road quickly, which has to do with the absence of cabinet in Edo State as of today. Two gentlemen have joined me already to help find sense in all of this narrative on the program this morning. I'll begin from my immediate left. Christopher Ojekere is a public affairs analyst. So thank you for coming, Chris. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Louis. Thank you.
Great. And next to him is a legal practitioner, Peter Ejiofor, who is going to help us find perspective, especially from the standpoint of the law this morning. Thank you for coming, Peter. We appreciate it. All right, great. Chris, I want to begin with you because in the build-up to the election last year, we had a bunch of conversations around politics in Edo State and the election in particular. As it stands today, events have overtaken all those because we're not talking about governance proper. That said, there are people who now say that Governor Godwin Obaseki has obliterated the record set by President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015, who took about 6 months to put a cabinet in place. Because the question asked then was, is a candidate not supposed to, as it were, create a scenario that they will win the election, and as such, have a picture of persons they are going to bring on board, and then hit the ground running once they are sworn into office? Governor Obaseki had done 4 years before he was given another 4 years by Edo people last year. That should have made it easier for him to have put a cabinet in place already. What do you say?
Yes, it's easier said than could be done because of the circumstances that brought Godwin Obaseki second tenure into office. Obaseki in his first tenure was a member of the APC, and you know, he inherited that position from a predecessor who was also a member of the APC, a government where he had served. And so the transition from ex-governor Shomole to Obaseki was almost seamless because Obaseki was part and parcel of that government, and Obaseki was an ally of Oshomole. And so when Oshomole was leaving, they are members of the same party. They run the same policies and programs. So when Oshomole was leaving, it was easy to transit, you know, from Oshomole to Obaseki. But that was not the same situation and scenario that brought Obaseki in the second tenure. We know the circumstances of why he had to move from the APC into the PDP at the twilight of, you know, the electionary processes, and hitting that new house, so to speak. There was already an established structure. That structure needs to reconcile its programs and policies and the structure that Obaseki was coming in there with. These things are not as easily reconcilable as they seem. They are things that you have to take time to work out if your whole purpose is to carry everybody along, and if your whole purpose is to ensure that after you carry out a particular action, there is stability, there is peace, and there is progress in the state. So Obaseki this time needed to reconcile those structures. I'm sure as a journalist, you would have heard once or twice, you know, some rumbles, you know, and even rumor going on that there have been tension between Obaseki and his and the people he came with, and the party and all of that, and then it was well managed by both parties, and then they came to a negotiation table, and then things are beginning to work smoothly now. That's number one. Number two, I am not of the opinion that people should stampede a particular person in carrying out his agenda. I understand, and I thank God the lawyer is here, that section, I think 192, mandates the governor of the state to appoint commissioners and special advisors as named there. Now, I also took particular note that the Constitution did not give timelines to which that will be done. And I thought to myself that the reason why the Constitution didn't do that, why it left that to be a subjective principle, because stating there that commissioners, there should be offices, there should be such offices as the office of commissioner, and that the governor may appoint anybody he chooses as special advisor. Stating there, as far as I'm concerned, is the objective situation.
Yes.
So the objective statement left it and made it, non-subjective to anybody who is going to be governor. That is to say, if you are governor, you are mandated and duty bound by the law. It is statutory that you appoint commissioners and you appoint other aides. But what is not stated there, which was left to be subjective, was the timelines for which this will be done. And as I was thinking, why would the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution, leave this kind of lacuna? It occurred to me that it was in the wisdom of the framers of the Constitution to know that every government has its own approach. Every governor has his own governance style and approach. And every situation differs from state to state. There are peculiarities of situations which you cannot legislate on a particular person on how to approach these situations or how to approach this, whatever he met on ground as governor. So the style Obaseki has adopted this time is that he will need to set up a template and a structure for his agenda and plans, which he made manifest in the mega manifesto and the 30-year plan which he drew up for Edo State. So I think that in pursuing that manifesto and in pursuing that plan, it has taken this time for Obaseki to put that in place. That also added to the fact that I'm aware that he put in place a transition committee. And then having put in place a transition committee, he told us the reason. He said the transition committee were to set up templates and build structures upon which appointees, whether commissioners or special advisors, would come and operate in driving his vision and driving his agenda. Now, this transitional committee, in the course of their work, I have, it on good authority because I was one of those who participated in the face-to-face engagements with different groups, different sectors and segments of the society, explaining to Edo people the policies, programs, visions, and ideas of Obaseki, and putting everybody on the same page, and promising every group, every time they met with the group, that after they have done all of this, then appointments will be made. So that when people come into the government, they already understand the direction of government. And so Obaseki's approach at this time was to do all of this before he kicked off. Now, I think what we should be interrogating is that between November 12th, when Obaseki was sworn in, and this moment that we are in, have we found, and I'm speaking about Edo voters now who voted Obaseki.
But he's not governor of everybody, including those who didn't vote for him.
Yes, I mean Edo people.
Right.
Now, have we found in the government obvious lacunas that have proven that government is not functioning? Have we found that Obaseki's programs, which he started in the first tenure and read out in the mega manifesto as continuations, are not operating? Have we found out that we are not having governors and there is no response of governors to needs and to exigencies that Obaseki has to contend with daily as a governor? In my opinion, I think he's been doing very well on that score.
With or without cabinet?
Yes, without cabinet.
So that probably is also suggestive that in a different state, for example, if a governor can prove that he can run the government, run the business of government without a cabinet in place for a 4-year term, for example, that also checks out. Is that a point being made?
Well, he couldn't run it for a 4-year term.
Because you talked about a visible or obvious lacuna.
Yes, no. If you started with me, I said the Constitution has stated the objective case.
Right.
The objective case that you don't have a choice. You have to appoint at a point in time.
But no timeline specified.
No timeline specified. So I think that's completely discretionary.
Right.
And we can now begin to look at you and see whether you have actually programs and projects and policies that can fill the space for which you are waiting to do that.
Okay.
So I think that's
I'm going to talk more to you about the overwhelming demand of government and of course governance in the course of our discussion. But let me talk to Peter quickly about the clear-cut position of the law about all of this. I've heard lawyers both on television and off talk about how that there's the illegality of running a government without a cabinet. I'm not a lawyer myself, but I want you to help us create that perspective quickly, so we understand the implications of all of this and how also the government is able to run effectively, efficiently without a cabinet in place.
Well, my co-discussant here has explained that a particular provision, section 192 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, provides for the existence or the institution of commissioners for a state. And it was a mandatory provision.
Okay.
It used the word shall. But at the tail end of that same provision, there was a discretionary provision within that the governor may. Meaning that while it is constitutional and mandatory to have commissioners, it is at the discretion of the governor.
Isn't that contradictory in the light of the Constitution?
It is contradictory. These are the things that the Constitution Amendment Committees should begin to address as the Constitution unfolds, as we implement. You see these lapses and they will begin to correct them.
Right.
Earlier that it is done, the better, so that there will be a timeline within which a governor should be able to appoint his commissioners and not to leave it to chance and at his own discretion, as it were, because discretion can be subjected to abuse and it can maybe irritate even the electorate, because if you look at section 193 of the same Constitution, it says that the governor can delegate his deputy commissioners to represent him in places. That we are not seeing now. The governor seems to be doing most things by himself or through his deputy or secretary to the government. So in other words, we have shortage of manpower in that area. You are aware that most times under this federal government regime as we have today now, the representative of government have always been ministers. The president hardly comes out. Maybe occasionally you have the vice president. So we are deprived of that. Section 14, subsection 4, equally says that in appointment of commissioners for the state, the governor, the House of Assembly will look at the diversity of the people so that there will be an even spread. That the people are deprived of right now as we speak. You understand? Obaseki has been a very good governor, right from the first turn to this time. I understand the constraints of the government as it is right now. These are political issues. They are not issues that even anybody can begin to dwell into. The answers are to be provided through politics. I believe whatever is the hindrances that he is facing with his party members right now should be addressed quickly so that the people begin to enjoy the dividend of democracy. Because when you take commissioners from different locations and make them commissioners of the state, they serve for the state and you have the spread. They reach out to their people, to their constituencies. That is not happening right now, and that is what is fueling the agitation. That people are thinking that governance is slow right now. That if you have commissioners, if you, for instance, you have your budget, who will push the budget? Is it the head of services? And that is not appropriate in a constitutional government. Under this setting, you are supposed to have the institutions and the structures on ground. So you can see that we have not complied with section 192, neither have we complied with Section 14, subsection 4, and even 193, we are deprived of all these privileges that the Constitution has provided. Whatever the hindrances that the governorship is facing, we should address them quickly. I am aware that at a point, he said that in February he's going to appoint his commissioners. That did not happen.
As it's 6 months down the line.
At a point, he also said that he wants to harmonize the differences they had at their party. And
the existing members of the PDP and those who just came to join.
Again, there was a committee that was set up, and Professor Abolaho was the chairman of the committee to screen commissioners. I mean, between that time and now, it's long enough for the governor to do something. That's what the people are agitating for, and I want him to do that because he has a track record. He has been doing well. I understand his concern, because if you watch what really happened towards the end of his tenure, the first tenure, a lot of the commissioners betrayed the man. They showed lack of loyalty, and he begins to make the man to worry whether he's going to have this set of commissioners again for the second time. It was just by sheer luck, grace of God, and the determination of the people of Edo State. That was why he came back, and that is why you should not take it lightly, that the people are watching him, and they are hoping that sooner than later he will do something about this issue. Okay, great.
Last week Thursday, I want to talk to you quickly, Chris. I spent a chunk of my breakfast time discussing internal politics here. I mean, as they say, internal democracy, and so on and so forth. How the political parties must get it right for that to reflect positively in terms of governance. In the case of Edo, for example, people keep pointing fingers at the PDP, saying that the governor has not fully settled into the PDP, given, as you said, the peculiarity of circumstances that brought him into that party in the heat of the election last year, and so on and so forth, right? How do we evolve a system where the governor or the president, as the case may be, is on the same page with his party? Because most times it's about the bread and who holds the knife, as it stands right now. And every time we have that back and forth, the states, or in some cases the country at large, will suffer for it, will pay dearly for it. At what point are we going to be able to run circles around all of this and then find a situation where there's harmony, where there's fusion between the governor in this case and his political party, whether it's an existing party where he won his first governorship, or whether it's a party that just moved to given circumstances, for instance?
Now, it must begin with reforms within the political parties themselves. The political parties we have in Nigeria are structured in such a way that they are not self-sustaining. The only person that has really run a political party in Nigeria that is of any merit is Chief Obafemi Awolowo of blessed memory. The UPN was self-sustaining. In fact, the action group was self-sustaining. Now, why the friction? If everyone's interest is to serve, why are we fighting to serve? I mean, there are delegations of duties for everybody who wants to serve. So why do we have to fight to serve? The point is that when it comes to brass tacks, it is not to serve. It is self-interest. That is always the reason for this kind of conflict. And self-interest this time, I use it in an inimical sense. Because self-interest, you know, in its objective sense, it's okay. But in the sense in which the self-interest is just to serve, then it is inimical. Now, the point is, if you have political parties well structured, in the days of the NPN and the UPN, the governor, the president, wasn't the head of the party. The chairman was the head of the party. In those days, if you knew the days of, was it Akiloye? What's the name of the NPN chairman, national chairman at that time? Adisa Akiloye. It was Adisa Akiloye in protocol that was announced before the president. So the point is that the political parties are lazy. They have not structured themselves in such a way to become a functional, respectable organ. Everybody is asking the public office holder to come and fund the party. So you have hundreds of people all looking to the governor to fund the party, or looking to the local government chairman, looking to the whoever is the elected representative, as the case may be. And so when they become elected officers, they dictate for the party. They dictate the tune. So parties should restructure. And political parties should be made institutional. They should get involved in programs. They should seek for ways to fund parties. They must put in place structures that will fund parties. So the party is an organ that will have its own manifestos and policies, which they will already articulate before the governor. The governor is supposed to be executing party policies, not his policies. Party programs, not his programs. But we don't have that kind of structure. And so a platform brings a governor in, and the governor is confused because they are asking him to do certain things which he does not have the constitutional powers or mandates to do, because he has to account for the budget. He has to account to the House of Assembly on the expenditure. And the electorate. And the electorate on the expenditure. So you have this friction everywhere. So if we are going to have to do that, parties must get back and sit down and do reforms within party and produce structures that are proper political party. I mean, you say, for instance, in the US, where they have advanced democracy, that this man is the candidate of social party. He's coming there to do the policies and programs of the Democrats. Of course, you have your own as governor, your own input. What you have is your agenda and your vision and policies of your own government. But the party has its own programs and policies and philosophy, which the party drives, and which yours must be seen to, operate within that ambit before you are even given the ticket. So that's how we are going to solve that problem. There is no two-way about it.
Let me talk to Peter again. I asked Chris that question because we recall last year on the day that the governor had gone to the PDP secretariat to pick up his membership card, and he literally made a song out of it, telling the leaders of the party in the state, look, I am now the leader of the party, on account of the fact that that is the position of the constitution of the People's Democratic Party. And the governor went ahead and said, look, I took out time the whole night, I read this constitution. It assures me that I'm the leader of this party going forward. Now, some people say, I mean, fast forward to a few weeks or a few months after the governor had won the election and sworn into office, the song changed from the governor being the leader of the party to some other persons within the party, some big wigs, some influential people trying to call the shots. And the governor says, look, the buck stops with me. I'm responsible for the leadership of the state, and as such, I must provide leadership for the people. So some people say that's where the friction has come from. Is there any chance that we can change this narrative of the governor, the local government chairman, or the president becoming the leader of the party? And then going forward, the issue of people having to take up the responsibility, or if you like, obligation of funding their political parties just because they've won some elective positions. How else can the party sustain itself if there's no patronage from the governor, the local government chairman, members of House of Assembly, or the National Assembly?
Yeah, let me quickly add that what people have also insinuated is in the public domain. Why the governor seems to have relaxed on the appointment of commissioners, he's not in a hurry. It's also because of finance. The fund to pay commissioners, and if the fund now are not going to commissioners, it's going somewhere, and we are aware that the government is doing something in terms of infrastructure and so many other things. So long as those monies are, the money is not being wasted.
So the insinuation is the governor is plowed the money
trying to
into development
money for as long as he could, because the money for commissioners, once commissioners come, they have their PA and they have other people around them too who are coming to also earn money one way or the other. So that's an expense. So when this money is not being spent in that direction, you know that the money is going to somewhere. Much
as I know you cannot give me, some tangible or scientific evidence of where the money could be going to, yes. I mean, having considered all the circumstances, the peculiarity of challenges the government is grappling with, and so on and so forth, are we not setting a bad example? Some persons have said this is a sole administration, for instance. Are we not setting a bad example? Is this not a bad precedent in terms of governorship?
That is why we are
governance.
We are also pushing for constitutional amendment in this direction. You understand? That
which is not going to happen by tomorrow morning.
Yes. It is not something that is going to happen overnight. The situation has played itself out at the federal level, even in Osun State and now Edo State. It is something that will be addressed along the line. We are still a growing democracy. There is no doubt about it. Now you talked about how the parties can be self-sustaining. He highlighted historically from Action group to
the UPN, yes,
how
under
the
this
party was going to structure. If you look at the party, even PDP, for instance, their national headquarters, they are still struggling to build it to date. Imagine how many years of their existence. From 1999 till date, PDP is still struggling to build a national secretariat. All the parties you see in the local government areas, they don't have any tangible investment. They rented those apartments, and those rented apartments, maybe one big wing or the other within the locality will pay. That is not how to run a political party. Because you are going in doing so, you are putting the political party in the pocket of few persons who are now going to be dictating. That was what was going to play itself out. It's just that the governor of the state is a strong person. He has a strong character. And that is why he put his foot down and said it cannot happen. And there were casualties, you are aware. There were casualties. And I think it is in the right direction. But what we are saying is that it should do the right thing. Parties should begin to build structures, physical structures. Parties should begin to implement their manifestos. Those are the things, these are elementary principles of government we read in the secondary school. I'm surprised that we are not doing them at all. The party we have today now is a carry political parties. They just come, they make you a chairman of the ward, a chairman of a local government, chairman of the party in the local government or state. It is an opportunity to make money. It is no longer an opportunity to build the party. That is the problem we have. And I pray that as we grow in this democracy, we begin to address this issue, because these parties have come to stay. Let us not look as if that we are in transition. Somehow, this party will just fizzle away, and that is not how it is done. In UK, that is not how it is done. You have the Labour Party. Right. They have been in existence for several hundreds of years. So you still have the Republicans, you have the Democrats in the US. You have them in US. That is how it should operate. Politicians, I'm aware you have just explained that you are one of the politicians. Please begin to do something about it. Fair is fair. So that the governor will deal essentially with issues of implementation of party policies. He may have his own 1 or 2 points to add to it, but it has to be party programs. You keep wondering why people join politics. They begin to make promises to the people. They say this is their manifesto, and then as soon as they get power, they renege from those promises. You cannot hold the party to it, because the party is not even stable. Just as one man is becoming a chairman, the next moment somebody wants to take him away. So those are the things that those instabilities are what we have to address in our party politics, so that we can grow.
Well, we understand that over 800 persons have been screened with regards to the cabinet appointments in Edo State. We look forward to seeing those appointments specifically being done in no distant time. But gentlemen, I want us to look at a different issue altogether away from Edo State. You know, the former CBN governor, Alhaji Lamido Sanusi Lamido, who also had been the emir of Kano until he was deposed, has, if you like, carved the niche for himself in speaking truth to power over time, especially as it touches on issues of economy and then social developments in Nigeria. And just recently, on his 60th birthday, during the colloquium, he talked about how that Nigeria has gone back to where it was in 1981. So we are relapsed 4 decades down the line, and so on and so forth. He talked about, in particular, purchasing power parity, how that as it stands today, Nigeria is said not to have made any progress, given the indices that we are saying. But Lamido Sanusi has also been somebody, some persons have said, look, this man has brought some controversy with him, even though we know for a fact that every time he speaks, he puts the figures in front of you. He puts the facts in front of you. These figures and these facts have always been institutionally authoritative. For example, they're either coming from the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, or they are coming from the World Bank or from the IMF. I mean, the Bretton Woods institutions, as we know them, for example. So, Chris, I want you to talk to us as to whether or not the government is looking in this direction at all. Does the government seem to understand what is happening with the economy?
If they did, he would still be an emir. We are all aware, and the governor of Kano State didn't hide it. When in the public interview, he told us that one of the reasons why Sanusi had to be removed is because he talks too much. that as an emir, he was not supposed to be talking too much. For him, Sanusi did not comply with the national psyche of being mute in terms of national exigencies. And being mute because you have no intention to provide solutions. Either because you don't have the solutions, and then you are angry that your ineptitudeness is being exposed by those who have the solutions like Sanusi, or whatever. So the point I'm trying to make is that the status quo are in a tacit and not so tacit conspiracy, that what is important to them is to just occupy positions of authority and power in the country and begin to and continue to mismanage our resources without any iota, either from lack of competence, or if competence is there, from whatever we cannot explain as the conspiracy of why they intend to keep situations the way that they are. If a man is speaking from government's own institution, the MBS for instance, and is quoting documents from the central bank where he was governor, and is using that to put his argument in place, have you seen any response from the government, from any official of the government, disproving Sanusi since he made that statement up until now? He was talking about our GDP. He said in 40 years we have made no progress. He gave the statistics. He gave the analytics. How we started in 1981 and how we peaked and then came back to where we are. So that in 40 years we are still where we are. And is it not borne out by the standard of living and the welfare situation of the average Nigerian? It's borne out by the sufferings, as he said there in one of the interview. He said, look, it is this cry that we are now seeing in the skyrocketing price of things, that we are now seeing in all the problems and even in the insecurity and all of that. It is the cry he has been crying, for which he has been tempted to be garrulous. The government is not looking for solutions to our economic problems. And one of the reasons I have always argued is because the federal government is unwieldy. It's too big. The managers of the federal government are not as big in brain as the size of the country. For you to be able to manage the country, your brain have to be bigger than the size, the heterogeneity of the country, and all the multifarious issues that are plaguing the country while we have the situation that we have. Your brain has to be bigger. That means that you have to have the acumen to be able to articulate ideas on how to go about it and identify the men and the material with which you are going to solve the problem. Government is not looking that way. Government has no empirical, data-driven, statistic-driven policies in place on any subject matter, whether you are talking of security, you are talking of the economy, or you are talking about corruption. They have none in place. Things are just happening as happenstance. We are on autopilot. So you have a situation here, they rush to deal with it the way they want to deal with it. You have another situation here, they rush to deal with it, and that's why I find a lot of contradiction. If Gabashe is saying one thing, Lai Mohammed is saying another, all on the same subject matter. They don't know whether the president is traveling today or is not traveling tomorrow, all on the same matter. So government is not looking at statistics. Government is not looking at structured arguments. Government is not looking at data-driven solution-finding mechanisms. It's not. And that's why we have the problem that we have. The other day, the president told us that the reason why we have hunger is because erosion has swept all our farms away. That is the president's own conclusion. And the president he said it with all sense of responsibility, that erosion swept our farms away. That is why there is hunger. But we know why there is hunger. So government is not looking at that. Rather, he is going to be tagged again as somebody who has not learnt his lesson from being deposed, is still talking in his Lagos residence where he is. But the man said that system, we cannot afford to be complicit. We cannot afford to compromise. You know, if we do so, then the problems will never get solved. So we will continue to talk and call government to its responsibility. Government has to own up to its responsibility. That's what we are. I'm not even saying solve the problem first. I'm saying own up to your responsibility. That the responsibility is on you to solve these problems. And then you can now open your door for people to begin to give you ideas on how to solve the problem. Because whether we like it or not, we are stuck with you for the tenure that you have elected yourself there.
Okay, I want to talk to you, Peter, quickly. The issue of blame game. I mean, we always find something to pin the whole issue on. At one point, it was recession. Later, it was COVID-19. And then we have always found excuses around the price of oil in the international market, for example. Incidentally, Nigeria is not the only country that produces oil in the world. We have countries across the world, in Europe, within Africa, of course, within the Arab world, producing oil, even up to Latin America. In fact, the entire continental America, for example, have countries scattered around all of these areas producing oil. Some persons are now saying that if Nigeria doesn't sit up, take responsibility, and live responsibly, we might end up in a situation akin to that of a country like Venezuela, for example. How much does that scare you?
Let's give credit to a few governments in the past that have really taken proactive steps to institute or manage government the way government should be managed to an extent. What we have witnessed in this particular government is the deterioration of the management of governance. You will give some credit to Obasanjo for some good things he did. Institutions he set up. And then even the part of economic growth that he began to build, the same thing you will say about Yaradua, and then to Jonathan. I think we were in a haste. We felt that we were not moving fast enough, and we thought that we could bring in somebody, a man of integrity, who will be able to drive the process better, and then curb corruption. And because of his wealth of experience in military, he can also bring some stability in our security situation. But that has not happened. It has not happened because of nepotism. It has not happened because of parochialism. You know, when you run government based on nepotism and parochialism, you are not looking at merits in appointments and postings of personnel on human resources to manage the nation. This is what you get, incompetence. That is what is affecting us. We are going to stay with this incompetence if things doesn't change till 2023. That is the fear we have, because you cannot tell me that you are printing more money. You have more money, physical money, chasing few goods when you are not producing. You are bound to cause inflation.
That's economically dangerous, right?
You cannot say you want to close your border and you don't want to import. Good. But within your country, you are not producing enough to serve. You also have issue of too much money, chasing few goods. Is going to cause inflation. So many of the policies of the government, they discarded past policies and brought in their new ideas. They are so radical that you begin to wonder, what is the sense in all this? Why don't you just transit smoothly and begin to see how you can even do better? Rather than discarding previous policies, you give the Central Bank of Nigeria a directive and say, you must set dollar at this price and sell at this price. And the Central Bank is incapacitated. You get these dollars through your sales of your export. You get dollars through foreign direct investment. You get it from property from abroad, property people transfers. Foreign
diaspora remittances
by Nigerians. So you if those things are not in place, you are doing nothing. What is what is the local content in the crude oil we are exporting? We are more or less exporting raw materials, and then we import the same thing in Nigeria. And you say, you know, the government came with very, very wrong policies, I must confess, because you don't mislead Nigerians and tell them that there is no subsidy, and now you are shouting subsidy. You misled us and use that as the cornerstone of turning around the mindset of Nigerians. They turned against Jonathan. What is this man talking about? There is nothing like subsidy. And now you are grappling with the reality. As it is, even if you sell petrol at 400 naira per liter, I tell you, you will still subsidize it. Today, can we do it? If you do that, there is going to be a real disaster in Nigeria, because at 18,000 naira minimum wage, how can people cope? Many things will increase, from the rent to the transport to food stuff, and salary remain constant. there's got to be a real problem. So the government has found itself in a very serious position now, and it is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. The borrowing seems not to have an end. And if you borrow for infrastructure, you tend to gain back. But if you are borrowing for consumption,
or paying salaries,
or pay salaries, that's consumption. You are not borrowing for production. Economics is about production and distribution. You are not producing and you are distributing, you are consuming. If we continue to become a consumer nation, we cannot. Now
that you mentioned borrowing, let me bring Chris here again as we wrap up now. Kemi Adeosun, former Minister of Finance, had told Nigerians in 2016 that borrowing will continue for a while. Her successor, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, has said the same thing just this week, for example. We've seen Minister of Transport, Mr. Rotimi Chibike Amechi, come to the floor of the Senate to defend Chinese loans enjoyed by Nigerians or Nigeria for a while now, especially with regards to the rail projects that we have in this country. Some analysts within the field of economics have said, look, Chinese loans, given the dynamics associated with them, are a banana peel. Right? Are we learning our lesson? Are we seeing the handwriting on the wall to say, look, let's step on our brakes. Let's stop popping gas and look inward to drive this economy?
There is merit to arguments by people that this government plans to be the last national government of Nigeria. And I say that with a sense of responsibility, because their actions and inactions that do not show that they want Nigeria to extend beyond them. They run the country like we are the last, government to be in the country called Nigeria. And so after now, the country can disintegrate. If not, how do you explain a situation where ministers' policies of borrowing? The loan with the Chinese that you speak about, Sanusi spoke about it, he called it a bilateral loan. China alone, he said for the $4.1 billion bilateral loan we have, China alone accounts for about 3.5 or 3.8, about 78% of the loan. We have virtually sold our country to the Chinese. If you have plans for Nigeria to exist beyond now, won't you be thinking of the future of that Nigeria and the future of Nigerians and Nigerian children that are being born? Won't you have a sense of responsibility to put in place how those your children can pay back this loan? Because, I mean, what do you call colonialism? This one is deliberate. You are deliberately enslaving the country to a particular country. We all know that the policy of the Chinese is to outborrow Africa, to make sure that they implicate you so much with your debt that you are completely indebted to them, and then they can come and take over your country, as it were, so to speak. So I am saying that every responsible human being, not to mention government, thinks about the future of his family or the organization to which he belongs. And he must be able to show you that if I'm going to borrow XYZ amount, look at the structures we are putting in place. Now, we have in this country a huge, in fact, I think Nigeria's gas reserves is the biggest in the world. The government is not thinking of tapping on that, exploiting it to leverage. Now, he's rather concerned about pursuing 5% for lands that do not even know that pipelines pass underneath them. He's rather pursuing how to construct railway to Maradi. He's rather pursuing how to build refineries in the Niger Republic. Now, we have a huge steel deposit in Abeokuta and Alaja. And Nigeria's steel deposit is considered to be one of the best in the world because in terms of processing, it costs very little to process Nigerian steel into finished products. The government has no policy on steel, no mention about steel. We have a huge textile potential, which was serving, in fact, was running the economy of northern Nigeria and indeed Nigeria at that time. The government, the president understands that economy. Was a full-blown manufacturer, was one time governor of North Central States, not Central States. Now, that industry, the government has not said anything about that. The maritime industry can replace oil for where they know what to put the maritime industry to use. It is a huge money spending, revenue generating industry. Has the government said anything about the maritime industry or policy they are put in place? So it is not as if our resources within, we have enough resources within to be able to tap on and create them into wealth. We have enough post-oil, resources to drive a non-carbon economy. Are we thinking of investment in alternative energy sources? The governor of Edo State said the other day that if we exploit our palm oil resources, it can replace oil in Edo State alone and all over the country. Are we thinking of that? So you don't have a government that is thinking of Nigeria post their government. We have a government that is thinking that the only way to run the country is for you to sell out this country to nations of the world in terms of borrowing. Now let me tell you, there must be a reason for that. The reason could be that the government is subtly negotiating with nations so that if it wants to carry out whatever agenda that it has, those nations will turn a blind eye. That is the only explanation to me. Because why are you a slave? You have all the resources within Nigeria. And he just mentioned predecessors. Predecessors try to put something in place. And then you met the country's economy. And from the time you took over up until now, you have completely destroyed the economy and you are going on the borrowing spree. I said it in one of the programs here, that they seem to think that being creditworthy, Sanusi was saying it, that the idea that we, to be within 35% threshold of borrowing, it's not comfortable with it. Because according to him, we don't pay back our debts from GDP. We pay our debts from revenue. You don't pay back from GDP. Now the government is taking our GDP as its own resources to pay back our debts.
That's an economic error, isn't it?
It's a huge economic error. It's like saying we are taking our country. What is GDP? It is the totality in monetary terms of all your production and services that you put in the market. We are taking it for debt. And then we almost, if we have to go by that calculation, we're almost hitting 100% threshold. Whereby that both we and our future have already been borrowed out. That's what the government is saying. That's the policy is offering.
Okay, gentlemen. Yes. Incidentally, we're time constrained, but let me give just 1 minute to Peter to lend his voice to this as we wrap it up right now. At some point, some people say one of the many challenges that we face in this country is politicians don't know when to draw the line between providing leadership in terms of governance as it regards the economy and social development and infrastructure development. All right, versus went to politique. I mean, look at 2023 narrative right now. It's louder than anything else in this country, yet we are at least 2 years away from that time, or something close to 2 years away from that time. What do we do to refocus our energy, our time, and our money on growing this country, moving this country forward, making this country to be competitive again? Because many people say Nigeria has lost economic competitiveness in global ranking. Help us situate that.
The problem we have is Nigerians themselves. Take, for instance, Lamido Sanusi. He was a CBN governor, and he was making so many remarks, condemnable remarks, about the government he was serving as a central bank governor. And he did that, and that's part of the reasons why that government crumbled. We have come to see that the government is even far better than the one he recommended. He was among those projecting this government as the best thing to come. He benefited by becoming an emir. It was when he began to dovetail, to begin to derail from their
They already became emir before this government came into place. He already became an emir before this government came into place.
Yes. And he began to have issues with them. So as it were, he is part of those who were projecting this government as the best thing to happen to Nigeria. So if he's complaining now, he's merely realizing some of the mistakes he has also made. So that is why I'm saying that the problem with the Nigerian government is with Nigerians. Until we begin to put things right. How many ministers can look at the president's face and tell him the truth? We don't have characters that can speak truth to power.
But Sanusi did that.
Sanusi did that. And there was
he did that, but you said he was criticizing the government that
was doing that. He was doing that, and the government at that point in time was democratic enough to listen to his criticisms.
But one of the circumstances that got him out of office,
there were savings from excess crude oil and other things. We have sovereign wealth fund. What has this government done? This is the government he brought to us. They sold this project to us on the basis of integrity. What have we got now? So if he's lamenting just like every other Nigerian, he should count himself equally culpable for bringing this government to existence.
Okay, I think that's a fine place to leave it, gentlemen. I would like to sincerely and especially thank you both for making out time out of your busy schedules to be here this morning. Chris Ojekere, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Peter Ejiofor, Esquire, we appreciate you as well. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Here's what we're leaving the discussion this morning, everyone, by 2 more interviews before we're done with TMI this Thursday. Stay with me.